And welcome back to the second hour of our program. Thom Hartmann here with you. Dr. Ravi Batra is a professor of economics at Southern Methodist University, the internationally known New York Times best-selling author of a whole bunch of books, most recently The New Golden Age, The Coming Revolution Against Political Corruption and Economic Chaos. His previous book, Greenspan's Fraud, one of my books of the month over at BuzzFlash.com. And I consider Ravi Batra one of our national treasures, a brilliant economist, a really smart guy, as Bush would put it. RaviBatra.com, his website. Dr. Batra, welcome to the program.
Thanks a lot.
And thanks so much for regularly coming on the show with us and talking economics. I am just looking at the top of Drudge, for example. I got a whole folder full of this stuff, but essentially it all boils down to this. Let me read you the top 5 headlines. Number 1, Bush says economy is going to come on. Number 2, gloom lifting, sense of optimism begins to ease onto Wall Street. Number 3, Dow crosses $13,000 up. Number 4, Chevron profits rise 9.5%. And the big headline on Drudge, jobless rate falls. So it seems like the corporate media is telling us, hey, good times are, and at the same time, we have gold is down $150, or more or less since its peak, and the price of oil is starting to soften, it seems. Is it possible that all is going to be wonderful?
Well, they have been pumping so much money into the economy since last September, and that's how many? Almost 9 months have passed. Mm-hmm. And in these 9 months, we still have job losses. We lost, according to them, 20,000 jobs last month, but the job report that came out today is much weaker than appears on the surface. We're not only losing jobs, but we are also working fewer hours, which doesn't show up, which doesn't capture headlines. Mm-hmm. We're working less time than before, and
so people are making less money.
They're making less money. Prices went up by about 4% over 1 year, and wages went up by about 2-3%. So that means in real terms, the purchasing power fell. So we are not losing too many jobs right now because we never created that money to begin with in Bush recovery. Yeah. So if you haven't created that many jobs and still you're losing it, it's a sign of a bad economy. But I would give it to them that we have indeed bought about 2 or 3 months with all the money that we pumped into the economy, plus the rebate checks are going out already, and so this will buy us some time. But the fundamental problem is not addressed. The fundamental problem is still there. There is too much production, not enough demand in the economy, not enough consumer demand. So if you are creating more debt, well, look at it. It is this debt that has gotten us into this situation to begin with, all that right. Housing debt, consumer debt, and they are creating even more debt now.
So here's, for example, the Bush administration is claiming that we just had growth in the last quarter, 0.6%, but they're assuming an inflation rate of 2.6% for the year. If the inflation rate were 3.1%, we would have a zero growth rate. If it were above that, and you just said it's 4%, we have negative growth rate.
That's right.
So we are in a recession.
Well, recessions have different technical definitions. Technically, maybe not, according to their definition. I remember Richard Nixon changing his definition of full employment just because his job losses went up those times. So when they change the definition, it makes no difference. The thing is, the economy is in a far worse situation. They're forgetting about the big jump in oil that keeps occurring every day.
Right. Now, this reminds me very much of the Reagan era. I remember when Reagan was president, and people would say to me, hey, this is after the Reagan recession. He had a very, very deep recession early on in his presidency. And then he started spending like a drunken sailor. He borrowed and spent more money than all the presidents before him combined, and with every war that we fought. And he spent all that money. A lot of it went to his buddies, his cronies, for the phony Star Wars thing. A lot of it went to other pork projects, and just a lot of it just seemed to vanish, it seems. And I remember people saying to me, hey, look at the economy's getting good under Ronald Reagan. And I said, you give me a $4 trillion credit card, and I'll show you what it looks like to live large. How much time have these guys, have the Bushies bought by essentially doing the same thing Reagan did, driving us deeper into debt? And how much damage is it going to do to our economy?
Well, see, at least in Reagan's times, the government was borrowing money from Americans. Now we're borrowing money from China and Japan, Saudi Arabia. So now nothing is in our control, actually. And I think the Bush administration has bought about maybe 2 to 3 months with all the prime pumping, with all the money supply increase that they have done since last September, and now with this rebate checks. But we shouldn't forget that the big jump in the price of oil is going to neutralize any stimulus that is coming from cutting interest rates and from these tax rebate checks. And oil price keeps going up. Remember, I think last time we talked about this oil price, and people are suggesting that it is demand and supply. Demand is rising so fast, and that's why oil is rising. And yet I made a forecast on your show last time that oil price will keep rising even though demand slows down, because it's not demand that is driving the price. It's the monopoly power of the oil industry and the speculation of the oil hedge funds that is driving up this price. And I made a forecast at that time that the economy is going to slow, but oil will keep rising, and that's happening right today. I mean, today again, the oil price is up to $3 a barrel.
Wow. Yeah. So we need to teach Americans the fundamentals that economies are driven by demand, not supply, regardless of what Ronald Reagan thought. For 7,000 years, classical economics has demonstrated that. And that demand comes from working people buying things, and when those people don't have jobs and they can no longer borrow against their credit cards in their homes, you're looking at the edge. It's like Wile E. Coyote running off the edge of the cliff and looking down and suddenly realizing there's nothing below him and the canyon below him.
Well, see, I like to talk in an objective way. I'm neither a conservative nor a liberal. I just look at common sense. And I think most liberals today are looking at common sense. I look at common sense, and the common sense tells me that both supply and demand are important in an economy. But supply is very important in an underdeveloped economy where you don't have many factories, you don't have capital already, you don't have engines of production. So supply has to be given a focus in an underdeveloped economy. But in a developed economy like that of the United States, where the engines, the factories are already there, the engines of production are already there, supply is plentiful, but demand is not. So here the focus has to be on demand, which means the focus has to be on people's purchasing power, people's earnings. So let me explain again one more time. The main source of supply is productivity, and the main source of demand are people's wages.
Right.
Since 1980, productivity has been rising very fast, but the real wage has not been rising at all, and in fact it has been going down. So when productivity rises fast and wages down, that means supply will run ahead of demand. How do you maintain balance in such an economy? The other alternative is to create new debt, more borrowing, new debt by the government and debt from the side of consumer, and that's what our governments, from Reagan down till today, have been doing. They have been creating more and more new debt. Anytime there is a problem, they either increase the budget deficit or bring interest rates down so that people borrow more, or do both of them. In fact, they have been doing both now. And by now, it should not be a surprise. So it should not be surprising that we have a $9 trillion debt on the government side, and who knows how many trillions on the consumer side, including the housing debt and so on. So a time comes when debt cannot rise anymore because banks have already loaned out so much and people have used up their entire collateral. Like the home equities are already used up now.
Right.
So by cutting interest rates, they will not stimulate the economy because the banks have suffered huge losses already. They won't lend anymore. So
I'd like to ask you when we come back from the break about the meaning of this most recent rate cut by the Fed. And do you mind taking some calls from our listeners, sir?
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Okay, great. We have Dr. Ravi Batra with us on the line. His website, Ravi Batra, RAVIBATRA.com, the internationally best-selling author and professor of economics at SMU. 16 minutes past the hour.